Welcome aboard. This is the Integrity 9.3 sneak peek by BlueCat. This is the third in our series of 3 webinars around cloud. Today's a little bit different. We're going to take a deeper dive into Integrity 9.3. My name is Kyle Robler. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at BlueCat, and with me is Brian Shorland. Brian's our Senior Director of Product Management. Welcome, Brian.
Hey, Kyle.
So in our last 2 webinars, we talked about increasing visibility and control in cloud environments. We talked about reducing complexity, and today, the third one, we're going to take a little bit of a different approach and give a sneak peek into Integrity 9.3. Integrity is our core platform for managing DNS, DHCP, and IP address management. And we have a new release, 9.3, coming out later in the year, and so we thought this would be a great time to give everybody a quick look at what that means. So here's our agenda. Because we only scheduled half an hour today, we can't go too deep. This is the sneak peek, but I want to give you a heads up that in April, we'll do a much longer webinar and we'll take a deeper dive. Brian and I will come back and go very deep into features, demos, screenshots. You'll get a real, just as deep as you want to go. But today is just more of an overview. So we'll talk about what it means to deliver DNS like a boss today. I'll give you 3 different areas that we'll talk about. We'll lead the discussion in these 3 areas here listed on the agenda. We'll quickly summarize, and then we'll move to a Q&A, and then I have a couple of closing remarks and details about the deep dive in April. Just one housekeeping item. If you have questions during the webinar today, you can type them in the chat box in this GoToWebinar panel. Through some magic sorcery, Brian and I are not able to see the actual Q&A box. So if you put them in chat, we'll be able to see them there. So with that, let's talk about Integrity 9.3 at a high level. Integrity 9.3, you can deliver DNS like a boss. What do we mean by that? So if you're the boss, you're in charge, you're in control. You have full visibility and command over your environment. It's stable, it's resilient, it's reliable, it's safe, secure, and performant. There's just so much packed into Integrity 9.3 that we tried to consolidate this into 3 different buckets. And those buckets are providing more audit data, managing complex networks, and helping customers to ramp up their automation efforts. So we're going to go into those in detail here. Let's take the first one, Brian. When we talk about providing more audit data, what was it that customers were looking for, and what were they trying to do with this data?
Well, there's a number of different things we're doing here. So we've got a lot of features crammed into this title of providing more data like a boss. The first one was to renovate how customers can capture the DNS queries. Traditionally in Integrity, you'd do this with query logging. The problem with query logging is you're switching on this channel and it's sending it down to a local file or syslog. And also, you're only getting half of the conversation, Carl, because you're getting the query, what the question was asked, but you're not seeing what the response was that came back from DNS. So this new feature functionality we've added in Integrity 9.3 is called DNS activity, and it's completely controlled by the GUI. You can go and switch it on by server, and it allows you to actually not just capture the query, but also the response. And that's the client query and response, but also the recursive query and response if you have a server going out. So you have a lot more insight. It's about 4 times the data volume we're actually sending. But also, rather than just sending this down to a local file or the syslog in the box, we allow customers to send this out to their SEM solution. So we can send it out to Splunk, for example, so the security incident teams can run analytics on it. If you really want to build a dashboard, you can build a dashboard showing QPS response, RPS response, top queries, and we'll dive into that in the technology deep dive in the later session. We'll give a demo of that. But the first part of this was basically providing more insight into the DNS data and allowing customers to pipe it off of our box, stream it off. The next side of this feature, where we say providing more audit data like a boss, is really about the system level auditing that's in Integrity. What I mean by this is who did what and when, who added a subnet, who added a DNS record, who logged in, who did a deployment. The problem we were trying to solve with this is we saw customers weren't actually, or we weren't providing the tools for customers to correctly manage this data volume that was building up in Integrity. If we look at it, generally about 90% of the data in the database was ending up being data that customers didn't actually require anymore, this audit data. They weren't able to set retention periods, Kyle, for the different data, saying, I want to store this data for 90 days, I want to store this for 10 days. So the first part of the feature actually allows us to trim that data down to the customer's granular requirements. If they only need the dynamic data for 30 days in the product, they can say, just keep 30 days worth of data. The same with the system and session level auditing. We've been very granular. The other side of that feature, of course, is getting that data that's not necessarily required to be live on the system off for security and compliance reasons into a SEM solution or data lake. So similar to the DNS queries, we allow our customers to stream this data off to their SEM solution. This also increases the system reliability because you have a smaller database, reduces the time to upgrade the solution. It provides all sorts of bonus things to maintainability.
Right, and why is that data important to them? I mean, why are we capturing it in the first place?
Well, obviously the DNS data is required for security. You need to know who's doing what in your organization. So that's a key challenge that we need to address. But also, because we work in some highly regulated environments, such as financial organizations, they're often told they have to either have in-product auditing of everything that goes on for a retention period, but also they need to keep this data for compliance reasons and regulatory reasons for many, many years. We have customers that are storing 5 years worth of data. You don't necessarily need to store that in the live system if you're audited. You need it in your data lake.
Got it, cool. Let's move to the next one here. This one, you know, in the context of our cloud series, I think this one was the most relevant about managing complex networks. But it's not just cloud, is it? There's a multiple variants of complex network relationships that we're trying to give our customers visibility so they can document and manage them.
Yeah, so the way I describe this is any IP address management solution is used to dealing with what I call it explicit stuff. You know what a network block is and you'll give it a name and you might say this is for Canada, this is for the US, this is for the UK. Or you might be adding a DNS record which says www.bluecat.com. That has an explicit knowledge about what it's for. But new network technologies that, well, not necessarily new, but common network technologies such as network address translation, virtual routing functions, VRF, even right down to things like dual stacking, these are implicit relationships. And customers need to be able to navigate and document these relationships. They are implicit relationships between explicit infrastructure that's represented in lots of different places in integrity. So what we wanted to come up with is, and what we've termed this is user-defined links, which is a technology which allows you to define the relationships. So you could define a relationship between an IPv4 network and an IPv6 network, and an IPv4 address and IPv6 for dual stacking. Or you could define a relationship, for example, called NAT, where you could have navigation from a single IP address for a source NAT to an entire network. And you just can click and navigate through. So we're trying to actually allow you to navigate and document these implicit relationships that are common in customers' enterprise networks, things like VLANs, VRFs, NATs. The solution itself isn't limited to just the IP infrastructure, such as IP blocks and IP addresses. The back end of it allows you to link anything. If you wanted to do something like crazy and link a DNS record to a DHCP host, you can do that. It doesn't block you from doing it. So we're interested to see how many different use cases our customers can call up. One of the beta customers, for example, is documenting their F5 VIPs, the virtual IP address, to the server farm in the background and dynamically updating that. As things change in F5, they update the user-defined link in the BlueCat system.
Yeah, that one's pretty exciting. I'm interested to hear more about user-defined links. I think the deep dive. Can you give a little sneak preview before April? Like, how does UDL or user-defined links? How does our beta customer? How are they going about setting that up, and how do they intend to use it?
At the moment in the 9.3 release, the setup of user-defined links is automated. It's through the API, so you define the link in the API. but you can actually navigate it fully in the GUI. You'll see a new column. If I added a user-defined link NAT, you'll see it appear in the column table for the networks, and you can just navigate in that way. Another side of this story, Carl, which we can't remiss on, is the fact we've improved the visibility into DHCP as well as part of this managing complex networks like a boss. And this was actually down mainly to a state that the DHCP server can get into. DHCP itself in its finite state machine has obviously the concept of used, you've handed out an IP address, unused, it's not used in the scope. But there's also this state that we didn't track before called abandoned. Normally this abandoned lease state wouldn't cause an issue for our customers because they have very large scopes, and the DHCP server will automatically go through and actually try and use an abandoned lease. An abandoned lease can happen if you have a scope and the DHCP server pings an address that it thinks is free and finds there's a response. Well, that means someone might have statically assigned themselves an address. Now, on a large scope, this isn't a problem, but as the scopes get smaller, say you've only got 10 IP addresses in a scope, and someone starts doing this, you're going to get customers or clients of the customers phoning up saying, well, I can't get an address from DHCP, and the administrator in Integrity would look in the BAM, in an address manager, and it would show as free because we didn't represent this abandoned transient state. So as part of this managing complex networks by a bot like a boss, we've actually increased the visibility by now allowing you to represent this abandoned lease state. All of the graphs, reports, etc. will show a nice little red bar now for if there are any abandoned leases, and you can choose what you want to do with that abandoned lease. You can just let the DHCP server naturally try and reuse the address, or you can actually say, well, I want to convert this abandoned lease to a static or a DHCP reservation. So that's an important side of how we help manage these complex networks by increasing DHCP visibility.
Very cool, very cool. All right, let's talk about the next one, ramping up automation efforts. So what sort of things are customers trying to automate?
There's a lot of features going in this, and we'll go into this in great depth in the technology deep dive in the later session. But one of the first things we wanted to tackle was appliance provisioning. This is the initial setup of our appliances and also the reconfiguration of our appliances going forwards. A lot of customers now like to use infrastructure as code tools, things such as Ansible, Chef, to provision their system. If you have a human doing it, that's fallible. If you're just setting up one server, it's nice and simple to plug the box in, go and type a bunch of commands, take it under address manager control. That's not too taxing. But when you've got hundreds of servers where you need to set up the SNMP settings, set up the NTP settings, all the service provisioning on these boxes, that can get very error prone if you've got a human repeating the same task over and over again. That's where you want to bring in automation. So the first side of this new provisioning system we've implemented allows you to provision bare metal appliances, so our physical appliances, our cloud appliances, and also the virtual appliances in a completely agnostic way. We have a new service descriptor, which allows you to define the exact ideal state you want for your appliances. And when you're booting up the appliance, you can just pass this information into the system. And when the box comes up, it'll be semi-configured. It's going to have all of the settings you defined in this special service descriptor. Things that you'd normally type in a console by hand and then go over to the address manager and configure. We wanted to avoid these multiple steps and just allow you to provision the box as new or provision hundreds of boxes as new, take them under address manager control, and then you just need to deploy your DNS and DHCP. The rest of the services, NTP, SNMP, any cast settings, all of this stuff we wanted to be able to automatically provision. That's one side of the feature. The other side of the feature, the provisioning feature, is we have a new set of APIs for controlling the appliances you've already deployed once they're on 9.3. The use case for this would be, for example, a recent customer of ours has hundreds and hundreds of appliances, and they wanted to do something as simple as change the SNMP community string on all of those appliances. Well, we were having to tell them to shell into the box, go down to command level, use a pretty undocumented tool called PSN client, and go and set those settings. Or the other way they could have done this was to actually just step through hundreds of appliances in the GUI and change those settings one by one. Again, this is something that screams for automation. Without automation, you've got a human doing it. They're going to be error prone. They're going to be thinking about when they can go to the restroom, what's they're going to have for lunch, when do I walk the dog. All of these things will introduce human error into it. So what we allow with these new APIs is being able to send the same service descriptor I spoke about for when we were initially provisioning via to the API, and just provide it, I want to change this setting on these 100 appliances at once, and the API will just go away and do that work for you. So this is a real time boom, being able to save all of this time and also reduce the human error. So that's one of the ways we're ramping up automation in 9.3. But also,
hang on, let me ask a question. Let's dig a little bit deeper there, Brian, because you mentioned one of our beta customers. In the conversation that we had with them, the telco, I mean, the magnitude of the time savings was pretty impressive, where it would take 30 minutes, 40 minutes per server, and you're talking about fleets of hundreds of servers. And
yeah,
taking out the human error alone, the time savings were pretty impressive as well, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's that particular customer that was a beta customer for this feature. It was taking them 45 minutes to manually provision a box because they've got quite complex configuration settings they need to apply to every single machine as it boots up. Because they didn't have a way of automating this, they'd boot up the appliance, they'd go in, type all this stuff in by hand, then go over to Address Manager and start typing things. And it'll take about 45 minutes for the box. They're now using the new provisioning system with Ansible Tower. On top of Ansible Tower, they're actually injecting the service descriptor, this configuration, into a custom OVA for their virtualization, which means they can just literally in Ansible Tower say, I want to deploy this box, this box, this box, and it takes them 40 seconds. So they've gone from 45 minutes to provision a box down to 40 seconds. Which is an incredible time saving. And of course, again, because it's automated, you're reducing the risk of human error being introduced into that.
Yeah, and days of provisioning to minutes.
Yeah, literally. Again, it's not just the provisioning, this initial setup. We can't renege on the fact that customers have requirements to change things on the architecture. And now with these new APIs on top of this, being able to say, I want to change the NTP settings, even the new functionality I should mention, things like DNS activity. If you wanted to switch that on every appliance, yes, you can do it in the GUI, but you can also, with this service descriptor, say, I want to switch on DNS activity on these 100 appliances in one API call, issue that command, and it will enable and deploy DNS activity, the feature, and switch it on to 100 appliances at once, no problem.
Very cool, very cool. What else do we have in the area of automation?
Well, we took a long look at the APIs and the way our customers are calling this, and this also falls a little bit into some of the work we're doing in the next release, 9.4. But when we look at the API calls that customers are being made, a lot of the time they were doing it for reporting tasks. They're trying to get bulk data out of the system. And when we looked at the way they're running these API calls, they're using APIs that are designed to actually just get one bit of data back, one subnet, one host record, and they're just calling it in a loop over and over and over again. Well, there's a bit of a problem with that. There's an overhead for doing that. Obviously, each API call still needs to check it's got the correct token, etc. So that's quite bearing on the system. So we've done a lot of work of optimizing in the back end how our API calls work. This is one side, so we've got optimized performance. And I'll always say your mileage may vary on this. We've tried to work on every single API, but it's a generic approach. We should see a big increase generally across most APIs, so we say optimized. But also, when we were looking at this stuff, we said, well, hang on a second. Our customers quite often have their secondary address manager sat there as a warm standby in case there's a failure. If they're doing read-only calls, why can't they issue those read-only calls against the secondary address manager? Primitive load sharing, if you don't need to put load on the primary BAM, which is used in production, use the secondary, it's sat there. So we're actually, customers are gaining from their investment in the secondary band by now being able to send their read-only API calls there. Primitive load sharing, but it does free up resources on the primary band.
Right. And how about this last one, deploying gateway as a service?
Well, this is again, I'm just going to take one step back because I meant to mention something about 9.4 there. I'm going to, we're looking at bulk APIs in 9.4 to import and export data from Integrity. We have tools in the background to do it in a very speedy manner. But when we looked at the API calls customers were making, as I say, they're making these singular APIs that are designed to get one thing hundreds of times to try and get data out in bulk. So in 9.4, we are looking at to actually add new bulk import and export APIs for that very function. But the last feature you mentioned is dear to my heart, is our gateway solution. Gateway is the sister product to Integrity. It's part of the Integrity platform. All customers have access to it. It's an automation platform. It's also what we use for rapid development of what we call adaptive applications, things like our Microsoft overlay tool, or even our cloud discovery and visibility tool, which are very critical for this conversation, getting that data from cloud into Integrity. They're built upon Gateway. The problem we were trying to solve here, though, was the fact customers see the deployment needs for Gateway can sometimes be a barrier. Gateway is supplied as a container, it's very modern. However, we were telling customers, well, if you want to deploy Gateway, you need to deploy your own Kubernetes, your own OpenShift, or your own Docker. You need to provide your own operating system. Our customers don't like this. They want to feel like Gateway and adaptive applications are part of the core Integrity solution, which they are. So what we've allowed in Integrity 9.3 is we now allow you to deploy Gateway as a service. So any of the Integrity appliances running 9.3, you can just go in and much like you do with deploying DNS and DHCP today, you can actually say, I want to deploy Gateway down to this box. So you're actually giving customers an extra boon here. You can deploy adaptive applications, CDNV, you can deploy Gateway, your own automation workflows on your BDDS appliances instead of having to provide your own bare metal operating system or something like OpenShift. So this is something we're going to build upon. 9.3 delivers the first phase of this, Gateway as a service. 9.4 will be piling more onto this, where we want to actually make it so the adaptive applications, or indeed the workflows customers are creating, appear in Integrity. You don't even have to go to Gateway's interface. They'll just appear as workflows in Integrity directly. But I'm talking a bit about the future there. But those are just some of the features, how we help customers ramp up their automation like a boss. So it's the new provisioning engine, how we've optimized API performance, but also how we can deploy Gateway as a service now on our DNS Integrity appliances.
Right. Well, I'm just looking at the time here. I know this was a sneak peek, so I'd love to keep chatting, but we'll save that deeper dive for April. So let's just summarize here. Integrity 9.3 is going to enable our customers to provide more audit data, to manage complexity, and then ramp up their automation efforts. So we'll move to Q&A here. And again, if you are looking at your GoToWebinar panel, you please use the chat functions. That way, Brian and I will be able to see the questions there. The first question here that we have, this goes back to the audit data. The question is, currently their query logging goes to Splunk. Will this new item need to be configured in query logging and will go to Splunk in the same feed?
No, so we use what's known as the Splunk HEC, HTTP Event Collector. So it's not configured using the standard query logging. It's configured directly in the Integrity UI. You go to the service control for your BDDS appliance, select DNS activity, you tick a box, say you want to go to Splunk, and you put in your Splunk HEC connectors. Then on the other side of that in Splunk, it's wherever you've sent that HEC's data to in its index. So you could technically send it to the same feed. If you, for example, you've got an index called query logging, you could send the Splunk HEC connector to the same query logging channel. But to be clear, query logging is line-based data. It's like in a syslog or a Ceph-type format. But the data we're sending with DNS activity, because we're sending vastly more information, is JSON. It's very structured data. So if you're used to seeing a query in Dig, it's vastly more than that. It's vastly more information you'd see in a standard query log. And we can dive into that. Obviously, in the deep dive, I'll give a demonstration of DNS activity running, the data as it gets into Splunk, and also some basic dashboarding that you can do based with that data.
Good, good. Another question here. Aside from the very useful user-defined links, do you have any new upcoming REST API methods on the roadmap? Functionality to add and manage LDAP groups via API calls.
We don't specifically have something targeted for that, but that's something please by the care team, raise that feature functionality and we can look at that. We are heavily focusing on REST, whether we sort of move over to a new RESTful API, that's a consideration. It's not in the 9.4 plan at the second, but REST is our go-to paradigm for APIs going forwards. We won't be deprecating the SOAP support we have currently, but REST API, all of the new functionality is primarily REST-based.
Good, good. Another question here is, how will these new API features affect users who have developed their own gateway application in other languages such as PHP?
Well, it shouldn't. If you want to develop your own applications, your own gateway functions, you can import the WADL, WSDL. You can get access to this functionality. We obviously have Swagger documentation that's been available since 9.2 as well. So you can still access that data if you want to build your own gateway-like application. We have lots of customers that do that too.
Great, great. A couple more questions coming in here. Will name stats be available via port 8053 for stats and reporting?
We're still undecided. That's not in Integrity 9.3. That's something we're doing, looking at under our improved service and health telemetry in 9.4. I'd question straight away, and I can do this in the deep dive, what stats are you actually after? Because if you're using the DNS activity, you have the entire DNS traffic conversation. So you can derive those stats from your SEM solution. For example, if you wanted to do top X reporting, count the number of NX domains you've had, even on a per zone basis. Because you have the full data set, there's no need for the DNS statistics channel. That's not to say we won't expose that as a point metric in 9.4, but that's not in 9.3 currently.
Okay, good. I think we have time for maybe one or two more here. So is BlueCat Address Manager, or BAM, supported on VMware vSphere and include the audit API capabilities?
Yes.
Very good, very good.
Our BAM is supported on VMware, KVM, Hyper-V, Nutanix, AWS, Azure, GCP. So yes, we can deploy BAM or BDS pretty much anywhere you need to, including VMware vSphere. And obviously all the audit capabilities are API native. So once the BAM's running, you can send them anywhere you want to.
Great.
There was also a question about could DNS activity replace query logging. The simple answer is yes. DNS activity is designed to obviously send vastly more data. It's the full DNS traffic conversation, right down from client to recursive resolver to auth to DNS updates. There's a lot more data. Our idea is it would replace query logging. It's not, query logging is still going to function. That's not going away, let's be very clear. But our approach would be DNS activity is the better solution for this.
Great, great. Well, hopefully we've whetted everybody's appetite. They're hungry for more. They're hungry for the deep dive. Again, there's just so much packed into 9.3. Over 40 new features, a ton of API methods, fixes to known issues customers have asked us to look at. So we've set up a deeper dive for April 29th. I'll put this in a follow-up email so you don't have to write down the URL there, but you can see it, BlueCat Networks, deliver DNS like a boss. We're going to set that one for 2 hours. I realize that 2 hours is quite a hefty time commitment. So to show our appreciation for you attending that webinar, we'd be happy to offer you a free t-shirt and sunglasses so you can be delivering DNS like a boss. So come back and see us on April 29th for that. I'll just leave that page up there so you can see the URL. Again, that'll be in a follow-up email that we'll send you shortly. It'll have a recording to this link for today's recording, and then allow you an opportunity to register for the deep dive. Great, so I think we're at time here. If you stick around, I think we have one short survey that will pop up. So this helps guide and inform our decisions for content on these types of webinars. Please feel free to add your comments and give us your feedback here on this short survey. Otherwise, that does conclude the webinar. Thank you for attending.
Thanks, everyone.